Hey guys, so a while ago I bought Strike Commander, which is an old DOS game, and this is the original version which comes on 8 floppy disks. And as you can see, the box is a bit beat up, and same on the inside. And what's even more frustrating is the fact that none of these super cool disks actually work. So I have to probably find a way to fix that, and that's what I'm going to try to do now. So, have fun! Let me first try to show you what's wrong with floppy disks. So we start installing the game, but then after a while there are some read errors on the disk. So I decided to run a surface scan in ScanDisk of each of the floppy disks of the game. And in fact it turns out that every single one of them has at least one bad sector, and that means we cannot use them anymore because the files on the disk just barely fit onto there, which means that the data cannot be moved to any of the other sectors of the disk, and there's also no way to repair a broken sector once it's broken. So one thing with these Strike Commander floppies is that they have the label actually printed onto the floppy itself. Compare that with the, for example, the SimCity 2000 floppy disks. They have a paper label, so it would be actually possible to remove the label with, for example, a hair dryer and then glue it onto a different disk of the matching color. But with these printed on labels, that's actually impossible for obvious reasons, I guess. Yeah, we will have to find a different way to fix that problem. And by the way, take a look at the actual disks. Every single one of them, except for the last one, features a different print of a different aircraft, and I think that's a very cool detail, and that makes those disks very well worth preserving. Okay, here's the plan. So I will open up the floppy around this seam that is connecting the two halves of the actual body of the disk. And then I will take out the magnetic disk inside and replace it with a disk from a working floppy, and then glue the two halves together again with some super glue. I hope that works out. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so let's get started by trying to open up the first disk and trying to get out the actual magnetic disk inside. So what I'm trying to do is to get a small gap between the two halves of the floppy, so that I can then use a knife to cut through the two plastic nibs that are connecting them. That's a whole lot more complicated than I thought, and my thumbnail hurts a lot after trying to pry open the two halves with my nail all the time. But in the end I managed to do it. I think maybe I was a bit too careful with the discs, and it took me a long time to get them open, but I was really afraid of basically damaging the plastic casing, and that would have meant that the whole discs looked ugly afterwards, so I was extra careful and maybe a bit overly careful, but yeah, that's how I did it. I'm also wearing one rubber glove because I will have to touch the good magnetic discs later that I will extract from a different working disc, and I don't want to get any stains on it, like from the fats in my skin or anything like that. So I finally managed to open the case, and I'm now trying to very carefully extract the magnetic disc because I don't want to ruin the dust cover mechanism in front of the disc that's covering the access hole which the drive uses to actually access the disc. And here is the disk. You can actually see that there is some damage on it. Looks like there was maybe a dust particle trapped between the disk and the read head, or maybe inside the disk enclosure. And that seems to have ruined some of the magnetic coating, and that's probably the explanation why this disk is not readable anymore. So just to be sure that there is no dust particle inside the case that is going to ruin the next magnetic disk that I'm putting in there too, I'm quickly cleaning the inside of the case using some compressed air. So the first half of the work for this disk is done. All that we have left to do is to get a good working floppy, and I prepared one by actually installing the game image onto it already. And now I'm going to extract it the same way that I extracted the original magnetic disk from the Strike Commander floppy. Just a bit more careful with the magnetic disk this time, and maybe not care so much about the plastic case, because that's going to be waste anyway. Taking it out very carefully, trying not to touch the plastic casing with the magnetic disk at all. And just to make sure that we're not destroying the new disk either with some dust particles, I'm also cleaning the magnetic disk with canned air to remove any remaining dust particles. Then I noticed one tiny particle that was not going away even with compressed air, and so I tried carefully to remove it with the pair of tweezers, and I think that worked out okay. And then of course it was time to slip it back into the original Strike Commander floppy disk case. And I figured out the easiest way to do it is to open it up a bit and then drop the magnetic disk into the case and hope that it gets caught in the spindle hole that is there. Of course, it cannot stay the way it is now. We have to make sure that the disk is closed correctly again, and I'm just using 2 tiny droplets of super glue on the 2 nibs that I cut when opening the disk, and I think that worked out quite okay. So that means done with 1 disk and 7 to go. Yeah, I'll spare you the details of that. I guess it will not be super interesting for you to see me do the same thing 7 times over. But in the end, I had 8 working Strike Commander disks. So now that the disks are taken care of, all that is left is the box. And I think this might be a bit even bigger operation. This is the outer box. As you can see, it has a slight crease right there. And the same on the other side. So maybe, I think someone maybe put something on there, like a heavy weight or something. And if you compare that with the cover of the inner box, then it looks actually pretty much the same. You have the same crease here. And on the back side, you see those creases. I'm not sure how well we will be able to get rid of those, but we will at least try, I guess. And there's this third part, and they all have this like this bent back or spine or whatever you call it. And actually there's also a slight rip here, which I will try to take care of. I'm not sure how I will do that, but I guess I'll come up with something eventually. So, according to the internet, there are 2 popular methods to repair out-of-shape boxes. The first one is to basically just iron the boxes, and that's what I'm going to try on the black parts of the inner box. But I cannot do that on the outer box because I think that it may have a plastic coating, and I'm afraid that the iron would actually burn the coating and make the box look terrible. But for the 2 inner parts, I will just unfold them and then apply some pressure with the iron, which is set to the highest temperature possible, and then we'll see how that goes. So that's the first part done, and I'm now just reassembling it, and I think the result is actually pretty good. There are 2 small spots where the heat apparently decolorized a bit of the black coating, and I think if I had used some kind of cloth, then that would not have happened, so that's probably a lesson learned for the next time. But for the time being, I think the result is not too bad actually. While the creases have not been completely removed, they're at least a lot less pronounced now, I guess, and the shape of the box is, well, square and boxy again. Okay, doing the exact same thing to the second part of the inner box. Sadly, I did both of them in one go, so this one still didn't get the cloth between the iron and the actual box, but the result turned out to be quite okay. So yeah, after reassembling the box, you can actually see that it looks a lot better than it did before. Now for the outer box, as I said, it is apparently plastic covered, so I can't use the iron. Instead, I'm going to use the second technique that's proposed on the internet usually, and that is to make the box wet, which I have to use the inside only because that half is apparently not covered with plastics. And then just put some weights on top and wait until it's dry actually. I hope that will make all the cardboard straight again and that it will look fine afterwards. So I'll now let that sit for a day or so and then we'll be able to see the result. So while that is drying, I'll treat the rip in the inner box. And the method that I found on the internet, and I think should work quite well in this case, is to basically just use wood glue on both parts of the rip. And before that, I will basically just roll back the black outer layer of the cardboard, then apply the wood glue, and then finally fold back the black layer over the freshly glued part, and that should actually make it look relatively good. Maybe I will have to treat it with another layer of marker or something to make the ripped part look less pronounced, but we'll see how that turns out. It's usually suggested to cover the rip with some kind of scotch tape or something like that to make sure that the glued parts stick together very well, and then to remove it afterwards. But I think that method mostly applies to cases where the sides of the box are completely ripped apart and they don't hold together at all anymore. But since the rip is not all the way through in this case, I think it will just work fine if I just let it sit for a few hours and not touch it anymore. I'm also trying to make sure that I don't spill any of the glue onto the surface of the box, and that doesn't always work out perfectly, but then I just use my finger basically to remove the excess glue. Alright, it's been about 2 days since I put all this together, and I'm now going to take a look at the outer cover of the box and see how that turned out. Yeah, I think the spines are pretty straight again now. Overall, a pretty great success, I think. And here are the two parts of the inner box. I already checked them out and I think they turned out pretty great too. The rip looks a lot less like a rip and more like a scratch now. I don't think I will even treat it with some marker or something, because honestly I think it's okay the way it is now. So let's reassemble the box and see what it looks like. So, and with those results, I think I would not recommend the ironing method, because you know, the lacquered part of the boxes, they don't like the heat and the pressure with and the rubbing. So I think that's not what you should do, but I'm really surprised by the watering and then just putting some weight on top of them method, because that turned out really great and I'm really happy with the results of those. So lesson learned, and maybe you can benefit from my experience too. So in theory that meant I was done, but sadly when I got the game the manual was missing. And that's something I cannot really live with for this game, because the manual is also the copy protection. So I decided to make a reproduction of the manual for myself. And luckily there's a great quality PDF file available on archive.org. So I downloaded that and then started turning that into an actual printed copy of the manual. So I found a neat little tool that is supposed to help you turn a linear document into something that can be printed as a booklet, and then it will have the correct pages on the back and the front, and it will do this put 2 pages on each of the output pages, and it will use the front and back, and in theory everything should look good after you run it through this tool. But with this manual there were some difficulties. So as you can see, first of all it cut off part of the actual pages when it converted the page to A4 paper, which is the one that we are using here in Germany, obviously. And it also did the sorting wrong, so the odd pages are on the left while they should be on the right all the time. And it also didn't align the pages correctly, so I was expecting the left pages to be aligned to the right and the right pages to be aligned on the left. But that's not what happened here, as you can see. So when you fold that along this line, it will basically put a margin on the left part, which are the odd pages, and no margin on the right. And that will just look very weird, and it will be hard to cut the paper in the correct size afterwards. So I decided to do some command line magic using PDFjam and PDFTK on the Linux command line, and reorder the pages and scale them and align them correctly first. Okay, here's what I did. So first I had to remove the front and back cover from the document because they had different sizes and they needed to be on a separate page anyway. Then I separated the pages into odd and even pages, as you can see here, and then aligned them on an A4 paper accordingly, so that the odd pages are aligned to the left and the even pages are aligned to the right. And I even left a small extra margin on the inside, so that when stapling the manual later on, it would have enough space that I could easily read the inside and it would not all be too tight. Then I shuffled the pages back together so that I got one document out of them again, and in the end produced a second document with the back and front cover with no margin on the inside. And that's the final result after running this through Booklet Imposer again. This time you can see that the pages are all visible completely. The odd pages are on the right, the even pages on the left, and it all folds perfectly fine through the center of the page. And so I went ahead and printed that thing. Of course, the laser printer is not very well suited to print on glossy paper, so I went to a print shop instead and printed the cover there, because otherwise the toner of the laser printer would just look matte again, even on the glossy paper, so that would not be a big advantage for me. And I also had the pages cut there so that there are no margins left, and it all looks nice now. And here's the final result. As you can see, it looks pretty neat in my opinion. I think it's a tiny bit smaller than the original, but I'm not sure because I've never seen the original. On the inside, on the bottom, some of the page numbers are slightly cut off, but actually I'm okay with that. And it has a nice glossy finish, and I like that a lot. So, final result, I'm happy with it. So, with that all done, there was only one thing left to do, and that is install the game and finally play it. And even the copy protection isn't a problem now anymore. And to show you that the repair of the floppies actually worked, I'll show you the whole thing now. But sped up, of course. And done. That takes 18 minutes in real life though.
You take him out or I will. Back off. I've almost got tone. Nice kill, hotshot.
And that's the end of the video. If you liked it, please like, share and subscribe. That would be highly appreciated. Yeah, bye.